So Chicago is obstructing the buses that the southern border states are sending with illegal immigrants into Chicago, even though Chicago is a sanctuary city and bring us everybody that you can, until they realize, oh, there's such a thing as a budget and we're in what's known as a deficit. And now we can't handle any more people. So we're going to start impounding those buses. We're going to start fining and possibly arresting the bus drivers. We're going to impound the buses. And this is literally what Chicago is doing. It's not very sanctuary state, like, is it? It's just, that's not a sanctuary city thing to be doing. No. Meanwhile, Texas begins flying migrants from the United States-Mexico border, southern border, to Chicago with first plane carrying 120 people. Yeah. So Greg Abbott's like, all right, you won't take our buses. We're going to fly them in. Let's get into this. Here we go. First plane load landed Tuesday. Recording this for you on a Thursday. This is just happening. So Texas begins flying the migrants in. The first flight of migrants from the Texas border arrived on Tuesday in Chicago on Tuesday. And this is what Greg Abbott had to say. I love Greg Abbott. I wish he was the governor of my state, but then everything would just be all mixed up. Could you imagine Greg Abbott dealing with the blue-haired freaks that I have to deal with here? Just be ridiculous, right? Okay. You guys can watch this video. Sanctuary City, Chicago started obstructing and targeting our busing mission. That's what Greg Abbott is saying. Texas will now expand our operation to include flights to Chicago. Until Biden steps up to secure the border, we will continue to provide overwhelmed Texas border towns with much needed relief. That's what you got going on. It's just insane, right? That this is where we sit. We've got governors just trying to provide relief, and then everybody in the blue states going, this is political theater. This doesn't really help out the crisis at all. Yeah, well, neither does a wide open border, does it? All right, let's watch a real video here.
It is Governor Greg Abbott's latest move in the battle over security at the southern border. The first flight has already landed in Chicago. Candace Sweat has reaction and why the Windy City was Texas's first target.
More than 120 migrants stepped onto a plane in El Paso, headed for Chicago.
I already gave you a sneak peek of this.
Governor Greg Abbott started sending buses with migrant passengers from Texas to other Democratic-led cities like Philadelphia, New York City, and Denver. Tuesday's flight to Chicago was the first time Abbott transported migrants by air. The move comes after Chicago officials began cracking down on migrant buses for allegedly violating ordinances. Following the plane's departure, Governor Greg Abbott released a statement that reads in part, Sanctuary City, Chicago started obstructing and targeting our busing mission. Texas will now expand our operation to include flights to Chicago. Faisal Al-Jabari is a spokesperson for Raices, a Texas-based nonprofit that provides legal and social services for migrants. He says this is nothing more than political theater.
The buses, the planes, the buoys, the barbed wires, they don't do anything to slow down migration at the end of the day. But these political stunts, what they're doing is they're causing a devastating blow.
Since landing at O'Hare, Chicago.
To who? To who? The blow is coming to the southern states that have to take the first wave of these folks coming through. Where's this perceived blow? Oh, it's just a big blow. It's like, you can't have a wide open border and not expect there to be, blowback on everybody, because Texas has got to pay for these planes. Texas has got to pay for these buses, and they're already loaded up. So they've been loaded up for years on folks that, come to the country and need resources. And now Chicago's, I don't really know what to do. All right, find those bus drivers, impound those buses. They violated something, right? I mean,
Chicago city officials began working to find space in its shelter system.
What it appears is that there is a purposeful lack of coordination in order to, again, sort of catch certain politicians flat-footed and to try and make a statement out of that.
In November, Chicago implemented a bus safety ordinance to ensure orderly intake of new arrivals. Since the start of his operation, Abbott has bused some 80,000 migrants to cities outside of Texas. Candace Sweat, NBC5.
Does anybody find it just absolutely mind-blowing, but then again, not, that Let's Go Brandon Johnson, mayor of Chicago, is like, hey, you guys are violating, this ordinance that we have about you just bringing in people willy-nilly across the board, from the border, and then busing them to us here in Chicago. You can't do that. It's against our ordinance. And it's like, yeah, but just letting people across the southern border is also illegal on the federal level, but we're doing that. So, it's just this total duality. It's like, you gotta be following our rules, even though nobody's following any rules down at the southern border. Yeah, it's staggering to me that this is where we sit. Everybody's out for themselves, right? And if there was no issue with the southern border, if there was an orderly way for folks to immigrate to the United States, like there used to be, if there was an orderly way of doing that was enforced, then Greg Abbott wouldn't be flying people willy-nilly or putting them on buses and, doing all this kind of stuff. There would be no need to do that. We'd already have a system in place that's being enforced, but we don't have that. So this whole concept of, it's political theater, to me, it's like, no, this is the action and this is the reaction. This is what happens when you try and just jam a whole bunch of illegal immigrants into the country without a system in place, because the current administration does not have a system in place. So Texas began flying migrants from the U.S. Customs border, U.S.-Mexico border to Chicago on Tuesday, a week after the city took a tougher stance on the buses the Republican Governor Greg Abbott has been sending north since last year. Chicago's in a little bit of a pickle. Chicago's in a little bit of a bind. New York City, little bit of a pickle. They got shenanigans going on there. They've got tomfoolery. There's no room at the inn. I mean, this is not looking good. So I find it just, it's like, all right, how long have we been talking about this happening? You can only bring in so many illegal immigrants, and then literally the inn is full. There's no more room here. And by that, the inn is full, I mean, the budget, you don't have the budget, $1 billion budget for illegal immigrants wasn't necessarily on the docket for this year. And you've got all the budgets are going the wrong direction, right? They go in the wrong direction. You do not have money coming in surplus. You've got the opposite, deficit. Somebody made the comment on one of the videos, and they were saying, Sean, you know what? The reference News for Reasonable People. The folks that need to hear this may not know what the word deficit means. And I'm like, yeah, that's true, because just keep spending. It'll work out. It'll be fine. I mean, send us the immigrants, and we'll just work it out. We'll figure it out, until we don't. And hey, by the way, your buses are illegal coming to our city. The first flight of 120 migrants arrived Tuesday afternoon, according to NBC Chicago. The governor directed state officials to begin busing migrants to Democrat-led cities starting in April of 2022. Man, it's going to be a year in April he's been doing that. And, DeSantis has been doing the same thing. Arizona, same thing. All right, if you're coming in, we got to move you through to other parts of the country, because we are full here. Southern states have, taken the massive brunt of this up front when there's just zero protocol. It's, come on in. It'll be good. We'll work this out. Over 80,000 migrants have since been relocated through the effort as part of the governor's multi-pronged border security mission known as Operation Lone Star, including 23,000 to Chicago. These cities don't have the ability to take care of their own, let alone 23,000 new folks that don't necessarily speak the language, are not generating any income. We don't know anything about their background. COVID shots? Oh, no, you don't need to do that. That's so 2021 or 22, whenever that was. That's so back then. We don't do any of that. And nobody did any of that at the time either at the southern states. Let them come in, even though everybody else has got to get that jab to do whatever in their lives, right? So I find this, I find it pretty entertaining. It's sad that we're finding entertainment over other people's lives, but it's because, this is the situation, and this is the situation everybody's been put in because there's no southern border policy. Yeah, it's mostly secure. Really? We just had a record number of folks come across the border. It's like 14,200 something in one day. One day. And President Biden's press secretary, Karine Jean-Pierre, claims that they're taking the southern border seriously. How can you when you've got record numbers on a daily basis coming through? I mean, what does seriously mean to you? I mean, how does that get worked out? Which part of record-setting numbers coming across on a daily basis indicates that you're serious about the southern border having some kind of containment? You're not serious at all. It's just, woo. Chicago City Council voted last week to toughen penalties on bus operators who don't unload passengers at a designated arrival location or fill out city paperwork. Well, we're not really doing that at the southern border. Why should we do that in Chicago? Why? And just drop them off wherever. I mean, the fact that they're getting a bus ride in, I think, is a win, right? They don't have to ride on top of that train like they do the Beast in Mexico, get up to the border. The city said operators began trying to drop people off in neighboring cities to avoid penalties, including fines, towing, or impoundment. Yeah, how'd your day at work go? Pretty good until my damn bus got impounded. Got towed and impounded. It's in the impound lot. We got fines. They're fining us. I mean, come on. Just take your sanctuary city and either embrace it or don't, because you got to go one way or the other. And right now you're going non-sanctuary city. Concerns, there's that word again. I have concerns. Concerns have risen about the living conditions and medical care provided for asylum seekers arriving in Chicago, spotlighted by the death last weekend of a 5-year-old boy living at a temporary shelter for migrants. I heard about that. I mean, how many people do we say came into Chicago? 20,000, 23,000. When you've got 23,000 people coming in, it's not shocking that a 5-year-old boy dies of something. I mean, I know we've had tons of babies born. You've got pregnant women coming across pretty consistently. I know we've had tons of babies born, but I haven't heard of a lot of deaths on this side anyway. That's a total tragedy. 5-year-old kid, somebody's parents lost their 5-year-old kid. I don't really know what the story was there. You probably know more than I do, but that's horrible to lose a life like that. You make it to America and then things get mucked up in Chicago and something happens and your kid dies. I mean, horrible. But just with the sheer numbers of humanity coming across the southern border, it does not shock me at all. You put enough people in a pot, something's going to happen to somebody somewhere, right? That's just how this goes. And that's another reason why you need to have a policy at the southern border that's enforced. Both when Republican presidents are in place and Democrat presidents are in place. It's just that, we want this whole notion of, no borders. It's fine. This will work out just great. It's not working out that great, is it? No. Chicago Mayor Brandon Johnson's office, let's go Brandon, did not immediately reply to a request for comment about the flights. Not shocking. That guy is a moron. Straight up. Let's go, Brandon Johnson. I mean, how the population in Chicago didn't see this one coming. The guy is just, he's the exact opposite of what Chicago needs right now. But you get what you voted for. So Chicago, enjoy. I hope you enjoy what's going on there. NBC Chicago reported that private charter flight from El Paso landed at O'Hare International Airport and that the city was working to find space in its shelter system for any asylum seekers staying at the airport. So they've just been overrun. That's the bottom line. You had them staying in the police stations. You had them staying in the airport. I mean, Chicago is one of the busiest airports in the world, right? I mean, it's a huge hub. It's like, we're just going to have 600-700 migrants living here. We'll just pull a big, we'll just pull a big divider over the room and nobody will know they're there. All these people walking around, right? I mean, we just need a set of drapes. We'll just make this thing happen. Faisal Al-Jabouri, he's the spokesperson. He says Abbott's move is nothing more than a political theater. Really? Really? I think it's effective management of an otherwise unmanageable problem. I don't think it's political theater at all. It's like he's got an issue. His state has already been overrun. You got to send him somewhere. Everybody's clamoring to be a sanctuary city, including Chicago, and yet they're not going to accept the buses bringing folks in. They want them right here, not over here, but right here. Well, sometimes life doesn't work that way, does it? The buses, the planes, the buoys, the barbed wires, they didn't do anything to slow down migration at the end of the day. Well, what it does is it pushes folks into the other adjoining states, right? And I would say it actually does slow it down. If you know, hey, this is going to be even harder than what we were thinking, and at the very last minute, getting into Texas has been made exponentially harder, I would say there's going to be some people that they're not going to go. Anytime you have a little bit of pushback, that's going to slow things down. And that's what we've got going on. You've got the floating buoys, and those are on the Texas side, sometimes on the Mexico side. But the court system has basically shut that down, right? Barbed wire can't have that. But Greg Abbott, he's basically pulled out all the actions that he can. Greg Abbott is doing what he needs to do to basically spread the love around. That's the way I see it. And he's taking it, at that massive Texas southern border into Mexico. He takes the vast majority of folks coming in. So until President Biden steps up and does his job to secure the border, that's just not going to happen. This administration is doing nothing. Texas will continue taking historic action to help our local partners respond to this Biden-made crisis. 100% agree. 100% agree. Abbott's multi-billion-dollar border effort has also included stringing razor wire along the frontier, installing buoy barriers in the Rio Grande, and deploying more officers. What else can you do? What else can he do other than just bend over and take it, right? And that's effectively been what's been going on. So you're dealing with some, crisis management. We got a crisis. How do we manage it? We bus them to elsewhere. We bus them to these sanctuary cities that have claimed, bring us all the folks you can. Until, this isn't working out. We don't have enough money. Weird. Who knew that? Earlier this week, Abbott signed a measure allowing police to arrest migrants who cross the U.S. border illegally and authorizing local judges to order them out of the country. So, all right. Then you start to get into immigration. Supposed to be a federal issue, isn't it? Right? You got Mexico over there, U.S. here. Federal entities are supposed to work out the borders. And so Abbott is literally taking it into his hands, even though it's already on a federal level, which should be enough to control the situation if it was enforced. Abbott literally is allowing police to arrest migrants. Now, will that happen? Who knows? So you've got a governor of a state on the border in Texas that's having to take matters into his own hands from a state level because the feds just aren't. There's no policy. Record levels of folks coming across. And we keep hearing about there's a wave on the way. And what that is all along the way from, starting in Venezuela or wherever it is, whatever, they start to see these waves and they know they can, with all the technology that we have and the heat seeking and everything else and drones and just, body counts as people move through these countries. I don't know how many countries it is on the typical trek. Is it 7, 8, 9 countries that somebody from Venezuela is trekking through? Maybe a little bit by bus, some of it by trains on these freight trains. You've got multiple countries to get through before you get to the United States. I mean, and we know that there are waves of thousands and thousands and thousands of illegal immigrants on their way. And you keep hearing about bigger and bigger waves coming. And that corresponds with what we know to be some of the, the known encounters at the southern border just a few days ago were like 14,000 in one day. One day. Those folks have to go somewhere. You can't just plop them in just get across the border and you're home free. That's a no-go. You got to spread them out throughout the country because the southern borders have been overrun for so long. They don't have the resources to continually manage these thousands and thousands and thousands, hundreds of thousands into the millions. Because how many people are we looking at that have come across the border in the last couple of years? 6, 7, 8 million people? Is it somewhere in that ballpark? You continually see numbers, right? And you're like, what? How is this humanly possible? Where are all of these people going? Is there any accountability for any of this stuff whatsoever? I mean, if you can't work out, all right, we're going to take them by plane or by bus or, whatever, train. If you can't work that out, and you're a self-proclaimed sanctuary city, the hypocrisy of these democratic cities, that's what drives me crazy. If you're going to do something, do it and just keep doing it because that's what the southern states have been doing. And that's the reason they're sending them your way. They don't have resources either. But, at some point in time, you got to go, this isn't going to work out long term. And it's just not. I think Biden is just so overwhelmed, or he's just incompetent, or he's just checked out. I mean, how that guy is going to run for office again? Do you guys think he's going to run for office again? You keep thinking, all right, everybody keeps saying Trump's going to end up in prison. I don't think that's happening either. But then he's going to run against Biden? I mean, the southern border is a prime example of just not having control over virtually anything. And there's been no control over anything other than just crazy, ridiculous things for this administration. All right, we're cutting the pipelines down and no more fracking, just ridiculous things. And then he's got to go on his hands and knees and beg for oil and beg for money because, our reserves are dwindling. Weird, right? Kind of like the dwindling reserves of Chicago when they recognize, this is costing us hundreds of millions of dollars. And they are literally in the process of, hey, you want a one-way plane ticket out of Chicago? Same thing in New York. You want a one-way plane ticket out of New York? We can get you there. Where you want to go, anywhere in the world, we'll get you there. Because the cost of that plane ticket, the cost of that bus ticket, whatever it is cheaper than keeping them in your state for 1 month. Just the ongoing basis, the cost of keeping these folks. And everybody knows this going into it. You can't have a whole bunch of people come in, expect services, and then just, it's magically going to work out. I'm sure this will be fine. They'll go somewhere, right? Where are they going? We don't even know, right? And another thing that I've been kind of working on lately is how many of them are not requesting a work permit, a work visa. Okay, so what are you going to be doing? How are all these new folks coming to the country? How are they going to be supporting themselves? Yeah, a lot of questions, No answers and no answers moving forward, right? I know we've got that whole border deal negotiation going with aid to Ukraine. I mean, are we still funding that war? It's like, right? Yeah. Whole thing is just, it's baffling to me. And yet this is what it is. So I say, Greg Abbott, you keep sending your planes, you keep sending your buses. You're having an impact. Yeah, it's not a pretty one, but it's the only one you can have, because what else are you going to do? Just let them all sit at the southern states and this should be fine. This will work out great. No, just ridiculous, right? All right. That's it for me on this one. Thanks so much for being here. Thanks so much for supporting. I'll catch up with you in the next one. Bye for now.